It's the easy way to do warm calls when you really do focus on creating content that helps you stand out. All the costs are going up for sheets and all that kind of stuff for beddings, and it's cutting into razor thin margins as it is. You cannot realize the potential off of a piece of paper. You actually have to talk to candidates.
Welcome back to Talent Hunters, where we explore insights and trends shaping the global recruiting and staffing industry. Want to build talented teams that drive your company toward big goals and big growth? Then this podcast is for you. And now, let's join the conversation with today's episode of Talent Hunters, brought to you by HireQuest. Connect with us at hirequest.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Vince Holt, and I'm the host of Talent Hunters. And today it is my pleasure to have John Carpenter, the Managing Director of Snelling Hospitality, located in Cleveland, Ohio. John has been successfully specializing in the recruiting world of hospitality for the past 13 years. Welcome, John.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So I'm anxious because I want to hear a little bit about your background and really, how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, so I was in retail. We were just talking about that offline. I was in retail for 19 years. I've been hiring since I was 21 years old, for 30 years now. And I not only did I hire in retail, but I also worked my way into being a regional trainer for a company, and then also a corporate trainer for corporate stores with Bed Bath & Beyond within the Northeast Ohio area. So not only did I hire, but I was also helping them teach and train their new leaders that came on board and new managers that started. Then after 19 years, I went and I was like, all right, I got to get my master's degree and maybe get out of retail, right? Let's find a way. And I did that. And when I did that, my parents owned the Snelling franchise here in Akron. And they decided that it was almost time for them to retire. My mom had actually been she was with Snelling from, I'm going to date her, but that's okay, 1974 until she retired in 2016. And Esther Carr is her name. She was actually number one in the company for like 20 some years in recruiting. Like, she literally had this whole wall. Every time I go to lunch, there's a whole wall of, plaques and awards and all this stuff, pictures with Howard Snelling and all these kind of things. And I was, you just kind of fall into that, wow, like, this is impressive. Like, so when they asked me to come on board to lead the team and I wanted out of retail, I was definitely in on it. And so that was 2012. I did it part-time for maybe a month and a half and then made the leap full-time just to make sure it was something that I wanted to do in early 2013. So it's been, 12 years of, a little over 12 years, but 12 years full-time of just hotel hospitality recruiting. And we do restaurants and country clubs and senior living and all that kind of stuff, but it's not, it's only perm placement, no temp to hire. And it's been a ride, that's for sure.
So it's interesting because my background is very similar to yours. And to this day, I stand on, retail was a great training ground to be successful in this business. It really was. The tenacity it took in retail, dealing with people in retail and so forth. In my nearly 40 years of recruiting, I too was in perm placement. I did a lot. My specialty was the electronic connector industry, but I did a lot in the hospitality world. We had hired a recruiter, got him started in hospitality, and when he left, I took over his desk just to see if I could do a different industry.
Right.
The hospitality industry is very, very interesting.
Yes, it is.
In a lot of areas, there's high turnover.
Yep. It depends on the industry. Like, hotels doesn't have as much as restaurants, but yeah, they get lumped together, right?
So what was it that inspired you to focus on hospitality?
So actually what happened is Esther was doing she was working with a company in Akron who owned 4 hotels. And we actually also had an office in their building. So like, it was like, can you help us? We know you're a recruiter kind of situation. And they asked her to work on, I'm going to bring back a name that people probably don't even know what they are anymore. they asked her to work on a comptroller. And, so she was like, sure, I'll give it a try. Like, it's something new. So they started on that. And once they placed it, they said, maybe this is something that we could do. So they started to do business development in the hotel world in Ohio. And then what they found out is hospitality was not just, hotels in Ohio. They were run by management companies that own the real estate that these hotels are in. And so they found out that, well, we don't need any help in Ohio, but we need a general manager in Arizona, or a director of sales in Texas, or an executive chef in California. And yeah, so like that's how it happened. And it slowly ramped up and took off. And then they started to build the team out. It went from just her to 3 people to, at 2017, we had 12 recruiters that were just focused on hospitality. And then COVID took all that away.
There was a giant speed bump in 2020.
There was a big giant speed bump.
And so what really have you focused on directly that dug you out of that speed bump?
Relationships. I mean, honestly, like for me, I went back on all the people we worked on, made the phone calls like we do, just stayed in front of people. But the big thing for me, and I started in 2017, was posting things on LinkedIn. And when LinkedIn put out video, I jumped on board right away. And the funny thing is there were so many times you would talk to people and say, hey, we're connected on LinkedIn. And they would say, I know, I saw your stuff the other day, and you just get constantly, staying in front of people. And I haven't given up on that. I mean, I still post at least once a day. And I feel like it's the easy way to do warm calls when you really do focus on, creating content that helps you stand out and helps other people. And that's just how it is when you still call them today. I mean, I'm close to 30,000 connections. You call them today and they're like, I know, we see your stuff on LinkedIn. I know I see your stuff on LinkedIn. Or when they're looking for a job, they're like, oh, hey, John, I saw your post the other day. I thought I'd reach out because I'm looking for a job. So honestly, I went double down on LinkedIn as opposed to much of anything else, but picking up the phone also helped a lot.
Yeah. Imagine having a conversation with people.
Yeah. Imagine that.
That already puts you ahead of a lot of the competition in the recruiting world, because everybody wants to use social media because they're afraid of hearing no when they get a hold of somebody.
Yep.
I congratulate you on that. It's old school and it still works.
And, I think that's the thing. Like, I heard no quite a bit in retail, right? And you just deal with it. I mean, no's not necessarily a no right now. It's just, it's a no for right now, not necessarily a no for down the road. And so if you follow up and provide value when you can, those people do come back. It's kind of interesting when you look at it, because a lot of people end up with, no, we have 27 candidates we're processing through. And I tell them, okay, great, I'll check back in a week. And they're like, well, I'm not sure if we're going to get through all those resumes in a week. And I'm like, I got through like 250 today. What do you mean you didn't get through 27 in a week? Like, it just cracks me. I don't say that, but like in my head, I'm like, that doesn't make sense. But I understand that people are overwhelmed and they're overworked, and, hiring a lot of times is just putting up a position and hoping that they get the right person.
So, gosh, you covered a great piece of ground that I'm curious about here. When you call those companies, are you calling them with a candidate in mind, or are you calling them trying to just find out if they need somebody?
We've done everything, right? We tried the whole gamut, basically. We A/B test a lot of things. Because I feel like since COVID, in the last 5 years, everything has changed. Especially in our industry, while we do pick up the phone, you're mostly leaving voicemails. You're not actually talking to somebody there, because when you're dealing with hotels, restaurants, country clubs, the managers or the corporate people are not in their office. They're not at their desk. They're in the field. They're running the property. So you're just leaving a voicemail. So, a lot of times you're leaving the voicemail, then you're shooting an email off or shooting off a LinkedIn message, whatever. And that kind of does help both ways. I also have noticed that lately, people don't want to talk on the phone. Even like the people they need the candidate, you try to get them on the phone and they're like, we can just do this through email. And I'm like, that's what you want. But, I still call them when I have a candidate a lot of times. And I'm like, hey, I got this great candidate. This is why he's wonderful. And of course, I'm leaving a voicemail, right? Like, if you want to hear more, just give me a call. And then I learned this trick from Esther that was make that phone call, tell them you got a great candidate, and then you don't send them for 4 or 5 hours. And then you send them like 5 hours later. And the anticipation builds because they heard your voicemail and they're like, where's this candidate that he's talking about? And then all of a sudden, we've even had people reply back and say, you called earlier and said you were going to send a candidate, but we don't have that yet. Are you going to send them? Oh yeah, here they are. And so you get them back in that conversation again. So
what differentiates you and every other recruiter working out there in the hospitality world?
The interesting thing is I actually started in hotels, right? I worked in hotels for 3 years. And so I'm also I don't mean to toot my own horn, a very smart person who really does focus on my own education as well as others. So I did everything I could do to learn the industry ins and outs, while I did work in hotels the first 3 years, I was in maintenance, I was in banquets, I was in housekeeping. I didn't run P&Ls or anything like that. That all came in retail. But a lot of that it just ties to the same thing. You just need to know the terms, right? And, if you know ADR, or average daily rate, or RevPAR, which is the revenue that they make per room, like if you get all of that stuff, you can have a conversation with somebody that's just more in depth. And, that's one of the reasons why I like to talk to people on the phone. I think I've had this morning 7 calls. 4 of the candidates weren't interested, but it was nice to have the conversation because it warms you up to learn more. Like, you learn what's going on. You learn what companies this company merged with this company. That's why I left my job and those kind of things. And you don't get that unless you're reading. If you can read it, fine. But a lot of times it's just having that conversation with somebody.
My favorite saying in the whole world is for all these people that text and email and all this, people do not hear what you're trying to say in writing.
Right.
I'm guilty of that. You could send me a text, you could send me an email, and what I read is not as strong as what you are wanting to say. And there lies, I think, the difference between what you're saying and today's generation of trying to find the easy way just to make a contact.
Right. Yeah.
So congratulations.
Thanks. And I do think you're right, though. I think a lot of people are afraid. They're afraid to hear no. They just want to do social media recruiting. And then you don't necessarily get to the passive candidates when you do that, right? I think the sad piece about it is a lot of hiring managers and recruiters are just like, hey, I'll just put it on LinkedIn. I'll put it on Instagram, Facebook, whatever, Twitter. And I'll talk to the people who come in. And then they're not the right fit. And then they go, well, now what do I do? Well, you pick up the phone and you start calling. Like that's what you do. And, and when I'm training people with my team, I usually tried, especially when we were in the office, I would pick up the phone and call them at their desk, every one of them, so that they got used to talking on the phone that morning. Every morning is different. So yes, I could have a conversation with you in person, but when you pick up the phone and talk to somebody, what's your day look like? And they're like, I'll come down. I'm like, no, it's fine. You don't need to come to my office. Let's just have this conversation on the phone. There was reasons behind that. And that was to get them warmed up on the phone. And that was, once you're warmed up on the phone, you're good to go. Right.
I love that. I love that. Today, what I'm hearing in a lot of different industries is some hiccups due to the immigration laws being more enforced nowadays. How is that impacting your industry?
It's actually not impacting our industry because a lot of the hotel companies that we work with have people on staff that are skilled in the visas, and they solely go out and they'll travel to different countries to work on the visas with these people and bring them back. And I think that, also a lot of them some of the companies won't even talk to anybody outside the industry. So like they won't talk outside the industry. They won't relocate somebody from outside the country unless they're a visa person. So it's not really affecting us because we only handle the leaders and the C-suites, and all those people are already, qualified to work in the United States. Now we do get people who ask us, can you get me in? And we always tell them, go to Marriott Corporate, apply for one of their jobs. Their recruiters will reach out to you, because they're worldwide. We don't handle worldwide. So yeah, it hasn't really affected us. I think the thing that's affected us the most is costs going up. Like all the costs are going up for sheets and all that kind of stuff for beddings, and it's cutting into razor thin margins as it is. And I think that's where the problems lie. So
really,
yeah. And they're also going, one thing we've realized too is because of that, they're going backwards in salaries. And I worked a position 2021 that it was a controller in Florida, and it was a $130,000 job. They called me mid last year and wanted to fill the same position and said the budget was, due to constraints, the budget was now 95 to 100. And I'm like, you just cut $30,000 off in 4 years. It's not supposed to go backwards. It's got to go forwards. And yeah, I mean, of course, we didn't fill the position, and the position was open for like a year. So
my question would be, so how do you expect to attract the talent we're capable of delivering when this is the salary they're getting today elsewhere?
Yeah, it's actually kind of interesting because they are hoping somebody's not working and will be desperate and just take the job, I think.
Okay.
Which doesn't get the passive candidate. It doesn't get the one who, and what we saw in the hospitality industry, because it really got shut down. Like, I mean, there were hotels that were closed for a year. When they came back, people were just taking COVID jobs. They were just like, yes, I'll take that $90,000 job just because I need a job. And then a year later, they were bailing because they got 140, which is where they were before. And the company was like, well, we'll just repost it at 90 and hope that we'll get somebody else in the same boat. And then what happens is you do that 3 or 4 times, the candidates out there know, well, that position's been open 4 times in 4 years. What's the problem? And you're like, okay, now we know what the problem is, right? We're not paying people the right amount of money. And, culture wise or not, it has nothing to do with that. You can't save it. If you have a great culture or not, you still can't save it if you're not paying people right.
So work in hospitality, do you work the whole country or do you just work the Midwest?
No, the whole country. We actually don't do a lot in Ohio. For some reason, I think I mentioned to you earlier, the cost of living is lower. The salaries are lower. And I think the companies are like, look, we know you're in Ohio, but we'll worry about that. We struggle with, out of the way places. I think I got one right now in the middle of nowhere, California, and, things like that they know they posted and didn't get candidates. And so they don't do what we do. I mean, we've already sent them 9 candidates in a week, and like they got 2 people going to corporate. And, I think people are shocked when they get that, and that we can provide candidates within 3 or 4 days. But because of the relationships we built, when we get a job, we know right off the bat who we want to talk to if they're still interested, and kind of go from there. So yeah, we do the entire United States.
So do you find, what are the differences between trying to search on the coast and fulfill jobs on the coast and fulfill jobs in the Midwest?
Well, after COVID, everybody left the coast and went to the Midwest, right? Because they allowed them to keep the same paycheck and work remote. And they realized that you go to Ohio, you go to Oklahoma, you go to Kansas, and you can buy a 4,000 square foot home for a third of the price as it would have been in California. And so a lot of people don't want to go back, right? And they've settled into the Midwest. and they like it. It's not political. It's not driven like that. The media has perpetrated a lot as well, because we talk to people in California and know that, the budgets for this one position, we'll say, is 140 to 150. We know it's a viable option. We talk to people in California. They're like, great, I want to hear more. I'm right in that ballpark. But you talk to people outside of California or New York City or Miami, and they're like, no. The media says I need 45% more than what I'm making right now. So I'm at 140. So I'm going to at least need 200 to go there. I'm like, you don't need 200 to go there. That's not real. So, that's the struggle we have. If we can find people in the coast areas, the New York Cities, the Miamis, the Californias, if they're in those markets already, it's pretty easy. But to relocate people to those markets, they really, really feel like they want 30% more than what the company's offering, because the media has said so expensive to live there. And if you actually do the research, the one I'm working with right now, I did research on the apartments that were within 30 miles of the hotel. And I mean, they're not bad. They're $2,000 to $10,000, but the average is like $2,400 for 2 bedrooms. I mean, I'm in Cleveland and pay $1,800, so it's not like it's that much more. I mean, so if you just do the research, you do a little cost of living, analyzation and stuff like that, you can really kind of find the right people.
So you kind of touched on it a little bit. We have a little bit of a trilemma going on in the U.S. with working from home, obviously part-time in the office, full-time in the office. You mentioned that you work primarily C-level and top management in the hotels. Do you deal with any of that trilemma in your specific digs?
There are certain positions that were hybrid and remote before COVID. The revenue positions, the finance positions, the regional roles, those were all already going hybrid and remote well before COVID happened. And then what happened is the hospitality industry felt like they were left out. So, all these other companies are working remote and they get to go move to Oklahoma, and I want to do the same thing. And you're like, you have to help the guest that checks into your hotel. You cannot do that 10 states away. And so we still get a lot of people that say, I'm only interested in remote work. And I'm like, I hate to tell you this, but maybe 1 out of every 20 jobs we get is remote. And if that. And so, you have to realize that those are going away in our industry, and they're holding on tight, but we've lost a lot of people in the industry because they were able to do software sales or senior living sales or somewhere along those lines that they were able to do remote or, hybrid. But yeah, it's because you're a customer facing position every day. It's just not an option. Like, you can't check in somebody at the front desk. You can't sell a wedding and detail the wedding if the wedding is in Columbus, Ohio, and you live in Kansas. It's just not going to happen. So yeah, there's a big struggle. It's kind of it's a battleground going on right now for that.
Yeah, it's still about the personal touch with the customer.
Okay.
And
yep.
It's going to be a hurdle in a lot of different industries. It really is.
Yep.
You touched on value. What differentiates the value you, Snelling Hospitality, bring? What differentiates you in the value itself? And please go into some detail.
Yeah, no, I think we're not the most expensive provider. I think there are more people who are, more expensive than we are. We also are able to act extremely fast. And I think that the value comes in that because of the relationships we've built. So when I tell people, they say, well, how soon do you think you can get us a candidate? And the value to me is, well, how does 3 days sound? And they're like, haha, funny, but that would be wonderful. Well, then you've got candidates in 3 days. And they do. And then they're like, well, wait a minute, you've gone too fast. Like, now we need to slow down. And you're like, well, do you want to fill the position or not? So the value comes in the relationships we've built. And doing this for 13 years and showing even my recruiters that I work with, Josh right now, and I had one that was Carol Ann, I showed them a lot of no email goes untouched. No email doesn't get answered. Like, we have to reply to every person, even if they're not nice to you. Like, there's so much to it that you have to rely on the relationship driving. And I don't think recruiters are like that. We always get this bad rap in the space that you're a recruiter, you're never going to let me down, you're never going to call me again. You're going to tell me we might get something down the road, but then I never hear from you. We make sure that's not the case. And I put that into people's heads from the beginning, that I don't care what they say to you. Just be polite to them, be kind, and reply to every email. And I think the value comes in the relationships. Like, we're able to know people and actually talk to them before they're ready. Like, people will reach out and say, hey, I'm just keeping you updated. You communicated with me 4 years ago. I'm keeping my options open. And because I remember names, like, I shouldn't, but I do, I'm like, yeah, absolutely. It's great to hear from you. Yeah. Tell me what you want. Give me locations and all that. And then I will use them as a call sometimes if I need to, like the most placeable candidate situation. Or I've also done a lot for Karma that says, look, if you see a position posted and we don't work with that company, I probably have the relationship somewhere along the line. Send me a message. I'll see if I can make the introduction. And it's funny when you do that, because the company is like, we didn't ask for your help. And I'm like, I'm not asking you for the pay. I know you don't work with me. You told me no 10 times, but you have an open position. This guy sits right next door at the neighboring hotel. He's applied. Have you talked to him? And I've seen it happen a lot of times where they end up getting hired, and it's more about the karma, the situation, and helping them out than anything. So yeah, I would say our value that makes us stand out is really about relationships. And I have some good relationships with recruiters in our industry that are competitors. And I ask them, what do you guys do? And the ones that are good are relationship builders. They really believe in building the relationships and helping people out. And there are a lot that just don't. So yeah, that's the big one.
Say what you do and do what you say.
Exactly.
And the secret to being successful with that is find the urgency.
Right.
Because if they have a need,
yep,
boy, if you say what you do and do what you say, you're going to win every time.
Yep.
That's awesome. To our viewers, is there any final words of wisdom you'd like to say out there about your firm?
I do love the industry. I do love talking to people every day. And I just wish people would realize that you cannot realize the potential off of a piece of paper. You actually have to talk to candidates. And I understand that if you make a posting and you get 100, leaders make a posting, you get 100 resumes, somebody weeds through them and they talk to 2, it's fine, but you still have to let people know that they're not chosen. But the one thing that we realize, and we try to talk to our people we work with, the leaders and the clients that we work with and all that stuff, is if you would just have the conversation, you realize how good they are. And I think that I was talking to Casey Reed, who is also part of the MRI HireQuest network, the other day, and he does the same thing. Like, he has a candidate, he calls the company and says, hey, this person's good because I'm going to send you the resume, but I can't tell you how good he is through bullet points. Pick up the phone, make the phone call, have that conversation, or at least leave the voicemail and then send the resume. So get on the phone is the final, it's the final piece. I think that was the ongoing thing through this whole thing, is don't be afraid of the telephone. I mean, we're on them all day anyway, right? So like, just talk to somebody. It's like you're holding the phone going, oh, somebody's calling me. Hold on a second. Let me put this to voicemail. Just answer the phone. Now, I won't answer my personal phone, but I will answer any work call that comes in.
Your wisdom is far beyond your years of experience.
I appreciate that.
No, it really is. You become a student of the business, and you become a student of the business to succeed as opposed to have a job.
Yeah.
I applaud you. I really do.
Thank you.
Congratulations. John, I really appreciate your time today. I really do.
I appreciate it.
It's always fun to talk to somebody that gets it. It's the best way I can say it.
And look, like, I think that recruiting, I think people are afraid of AI. AI only makes it easier for people. It doesn't necessarily take the job away. And, if you learn the AI side of things, and I don't even automate a lot, I just know how to use it. You set up your little tasks and just do it. It still does not replace human interaction. And that's the way I think we have to focus on it. Recruiting's not going away. It's just going to get more human, right?
See, that's that wisdom. With me, it was the fax machine.
Yeah.
And then the computers.
Yep.
Then social media.
Yep.
Now it's AI.
Yeah. It's always changing, isn't
The
it?
care doesn't change. Like
No.
you said, pick up the phone, have a conversation. If there's no need, okay, there will be someday.
Yep.
To your point, you're building that relationship.
Absolutely, Vince.
Congratulations on your success, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.